Good evening. Here's something to think about. In a nation pushing hard for justice, how can a drug conviction, one that looks solid, just crumble? Could a simple mistake in procedure actually set someone free, even when drugs were found?
This is a really critical question.
Join us. We're looking at a Supreme Court case that really sent ripples through the legal system here in the Philippines. It's making everyone take a hard look at how these drug cases are handled and, well, what proof really stands up in court.
Exactly. We're diving deep today into People of the Philippines versus Alvin Galisim I. Garcia. That's GR number 231305, decided back on September 11, 2019.
Right.
It all revolves around Republic Act 9165, the Dangerous Drugs Act.
And our goal here, our mission for this deep talk, is to unpack it all for you. We want to get into the nitty-gritty of the case, understand the legal steps required in drug arrests, and really break down why the Supreme Court ruled the way it did.
We'll walk you through the facts, what the lower courts decided, the core legal issue, and then that final Supreme Court judgment. A clear breakdown.
Okay, let's jump in. What actually happened? What are the facts here?
So it starts back on February 19th, 2011. Pasig City, the police, the PNP, set up a buy-bust operation. They apparently had information about people selling drugs in the area.
A standard sting operation, basically.
Pretty much. An officer, PO3 Julius Manigo, acted as the poser buyer. Undercover.
The one pretending to buy.
Exactly. And the prosecution said he bought a small plastic sachet, 0.02 grams of shabu, methamphetamine hydrochloride, from this individual, Alvin Galisim y Garcia.
Okay. And then the arrest followed.
Right after the alleged sale, they arrested Mr. Galisim.
Was that it? Just the sale? Or was there more?
Well, according to the police report, after the arrest, they searched him and supposedly found another sachet, same tiny amount, 0.02 grams of shabu, and also a .30 caliber carbine bullet.
Ammunition.
Okay, so drugs and ammunition. And they documented this. Yes, the officers marked the items they seized right there at the scene. PO3 Manigo marked the 2 drug sachets, and another officer, PO3 Kokia, marked the ammunition. PO3 Manigo also testified he conducted an inventory right there.
At the crime scene. That sounds like standard procedure, the marking and inventory.
On the surface, yes. That's what the initial testimony suggested. The items were then taken, first to the EPD annex, then over to the EPD crime lab in Marikina.
For testing.
Correct. And the test came back positive for methamphetamine hydrochloride. That was Physical Sciences Report number D5411E, dated the next day, February 20th.
So based on that, charges were filed.
2 formal charges called informations, one for the sale, Section 5, and one for possession, Section 11, both under RA 9165.
And Mr. Galisim, what was his side of the story during the trial?
He testified in his own defense, naturally. He claimed he was just arrested without any real reason, and that he was essentially forced to sign documents about the items they supposedly seized from him, a very different picture.
Okay. So, conflicting stories. How did the first court, the regional trial court, see it?
The RTC, the trial court in Pasig City, sided with the prosecution. They found Mr. Galisim guilty, beyond reasonable doubt, on both the sale and possession charges.
And the sentence?
It was heavy. Life imprisonment plus a P500,000 fine for the sale charge. And then for possession, an indeterminate sentence, 12 years and a day up to 15 years, plus another P300,000 fine. That was in their joint judgment on December 12, 2013.
Wow, life imprisonment. That's obviously going to be appealed. What happened to the Court of Appeals?
He did appeal, yes. But the Court of Appeals, the CA, actually upheld the RTC's decision. This was on August 16, 2016.
They agreed with the guilty verdict.
They did.
Yeah.
The CA essentially said the prosecution had done enough to prove the elements of the crimes. They also touched on the defense's point about missing witnesses during the post-operation stuff.
Like the inventory and photos?
Exactly. The CA said that wasn't necessarily fatal. As long as the integrity of the drugs themselves was preserved, that was their view.
Okay, so 2 courts, the RTC and the CA, both found him guilty. This makes the Supreme Court's involvement even more interesting. What was the specific legal question they decided to look at?
The absolute core issue for the Supreme Court was this. Did the Court of Appeals make a mistake by upholding the conviction despite what the defense argued were significant procedural problems, specifically problems with the chain of custody for the corpus delicti?
The corpus delicti being the actual drugs seized.
Precisely, the body of the crime. The defense was saying, look, because of how the evidence was handled or mishandled, you can't be sure the drugs presented in court are the exact same ones taken from Galisim. The integrity was compromised.
This is where the legal microscope really comes out.
Okay.
So what did the highest court, the Supreme Court, finally decide?
Well, it was a reversal. The Supreme Court granted the appeal. They acquitted Alvin Galisim y Garcia. This was in that GR Num 231305 decision from September 11th, 2019.
Acquitted, after 2 lower courts convicted him.
Why?
Their reasoning hinged heavily on Section 21 of RA 9165. They stressed that strict mandatory compliance with that section is absolutely essential. It lays out the exact steps for handling seized drugs to make sure their integrity is protected, from seizure all the way to the courtroom.
And they found that those steps weren't followed properly in this case.
Exactly right. The court pointed out several pretty significant breaks in that required chain of custody.
Such as? What were the specific failures?
Okay, first big one, the witnesses. Section 21 and its rules clearly state that the physical inventory and the photographing of seized items must happen at the scene and must be witnessed by specific people.
Who are these witnesses supposed to be?
Representatives from the media, someone from the Department of Justice, DOJ, and an elected public official. They need to be there.
And they weren't.
The prosecution couldn't show they were. And critically, they didn't offer any justifiable reason for why these mandatory witnesses were absent. The court even cited other cases, like People v. Mendoza and People v. Adobar, to emphasize why these witnesses are so important, basically, to prevent any chance of evidence tampering or planting.
Right, those witnesses are like impartial observers, ensuring everything is above board from the start. What else did the court find wrong?
Second point, the photos. The rules say photograph the items immediately after seizure at the place of arrest with those witnesses present. But here, the photos were taken later, at the police station, at the EPD office, not at the scene. That's another direct violation.
Okay, so wrong place, wrong time for the photos. Any other breaks in the chain?
Yes, the handling and transfer of the drugs seemed murky. The journey from the arresting officer, PO3 Manigo, to the investigating officer, PO3 Cruz, who actually wrote the lab requests, wasn't clearly established. In fact, PO3 Cruz apparently never even physically had the items.
Wait, the officer requesting the lab test never handled the evidence?
According to the findings, no. It seems PO3 Manigo held onto them and then took them to the crime lab himself, but not until the next day. The court noted this created about a 13-hour gap where the custody wasn't clearly accounted for.
13 hours is quite a long time for evidence like that to be unaccounted for.
It raises questions, definitely. And then there was the fourth link, what happens after the forensic chemist tests the drugs? The storage, preservation, that wasn't established either.
Oh, so?
Well, both sides, prosecution and defense, agreed to dispense with the testimony of the forensic chemist, PCI Perino. But they didn't stipulate or formally agree that he had followed all the proper procedures to keep the evidence secure and untainted after testing. The court pointed to People v. Ubungan on this point.
So, multiple procedural steps mandated by law were just missed or not done correctly.
That was the Supreme Court's conclusion. These weren't minor slips. They were significant deviations from the legally required process.
And the court felt these errors created real doubt about the evidence itself, not just technicalities.
Exactly. The Supreme Court was very clear. You can't just rely on the presumption of regularity, the idea that officials probably did their jobs right when you have clear evidence of breaches in the chain of custody rules. Those rules exist for a reason.
To guarantee the integrity of the evidence.
Precisely. They kept coming back to the corpus delicti, the drug itself. Its identity and integrity have to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And the only way to do that is with an unbroken, properly documented chain of custody. The multiple breaks here created too much uncertainty.
But what about the positive lab test? Didn't that still prove the substance was shabu?
The court acknowledged there is a saving clause in the law's implementing rules. It allows for some deviation from the strict procedure if there are, quote, justifiable grounds.
Right.
But the court said it didn't apply here because the prosecution never gave any acceptable reason, any justification for why they didn't follow the mandatory procedures. They just didn't.
So no excuse means no exception.
Pretty much. The court also emphasized that because drug offenses carry such severe penalties, like life imprisonment in this case, the safeguards like Section 21 must be strictly enforced. It's about preventing wrongful convictions. And interestingly, they noted Galisim wasn't even one of the original targets of the police operation.
That adds another layer. Okay, this case really forces a reflection. Thinking about it, what do you believe is more crucial for real justice in these drug cases? Is it catching the suspects, or is it the absolute meticulous following of legal procedures when handling the evidence? We'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Drop them in the comments below.
It's a tough balance, isn't it?
It really is. Now, did this deep dive into the Galisim case help clarify some of the complexities of drug law enforcement for you? If it did, if you found this informative, please hit that like button.
And let us know if there are other Supreme Court decisions or legal topics you're curious about. Leave a comment. We're always looking for ideas for future deep dives.
Definitely. Before we wrap up, let's quickly recap some key doctrines from this case.
Sure. First, chain of custody. That's the official recorded movement and handling of seized drugs, from seizure right up to court presentation. It needs to be unbroken, with 4 key links to ensure the evidence is authentic.
Okay.
Second, the corpus delicti in drug cases. That's simply the illegal drug itself. The prosecution absolutely must prove beyond reasonable doubt that the stuff presented in court is the very same stuff seized, and they prove that through the unbroken chain of custody.
Makes sense.
Third, Section 21 of RA 9165, that's the law itself, the mandatory procedure, immediate inventory, immediate photos at the scene with the accused present, plus those specific witnesses, media, DOJ, elected official. Non-negotiable unless justified.
Got it. And lastly,
The presumption of regularity. It's this idea that official duties are assumed to be done correctly, but it's a disputable presumption. It falls apart if there's clear evidence showing the rules weren't followed, like we saw with the chain of custody breaches here.
excellent summary. So the People versus Alvin Galisim case, it really stands as this powerful reminder, doesn't it? Justice isn't just about the arrest.
Not at all.
It's fundamentally about upholding the integrity of the entire legal process, every single step. Those detailed evidence handling rules, they're not just red tape. They are essential safeguards for everyone's rights, designed to prevent abuse.
Couldn't agree more.
Want to keep digging into crucial legal decisions that shape our society? Get these kinds of insights regularly, then subscribe to The Deep Dive. We break down complex cases and legal issues into clear, engaging discussions.
Don't miss our next exploration.
Hit that subscribe button, join our community, and stay informed.